Okay, in this tutorial, which is part 4, you are going to be formulating a couple of research questions, and you are going to be coming up with an hypothesis for each one. You should have so far written your introduction, which stated your aim, outlined what you were trying to achieve in this project. You should have explained what Bradshaw's model is and how it works. You might have chosen to outline why we should trust his theories. That was an optional factor you did back in tutorial 1, part 1. In part 2, you will have explained a range of factors that cause discharge to vary. And then in part 3, you will have dealt with these three and given a range of explanations. Now, what you can choose to do at this point, and you might want to pause the video in a second, is look at any number of other things. It could include one of these three factors here, or anything else. Okay. You might choose to look at how weather and climate can influence the discharge of a river, for example. You might choose to examine why the gradient of a river changes as you move downstream. If you're going to do that, get on a website, do some research, read up, and then give a paragraph explaining that factor. I would only recommend you do this if you're not confident about the factors you're giving. Everything you should have explained so far, all of the different explanations for why things change on a river, should be clear. And when you read them, you should understand them, what it is you're explaining. If you read back what you've already done so far and you're looking at a thing and you actually don't understand what you've written, my recommendation would be to delete it, do some research on something that's changing in a river, and explain why it changes downstream. And it's all got to be about why something changes downstream. And as therefore, all you should have written so far is something you understand. So I suggest you pause, read back everything you've written so far, and just check that you fully understand and comprehend what it is that you're doing. Now, at this point, assuming you have either just paused and unpaused the video now, or you're just continuing on because you're happy with everything you've written, you've now got to come up with the final bit of your introduction, which is where you give me your 2 research questions. So you're going to first need a little sentence that kind of outlines to me, the reader, that now that you've explained why rivers change downstream in a lot of detail, you're going to study 2 of these characteristics and seek to see how they change on a real river and compare that to what Bradshaw's expected. Now, we're all going to study discharge. So everybody doing hydrography is going to look at discharge. So your first research question, and you might want to take a new line at this point and say, my first research question will be to study discharge. And I'm going to investigate how discharge changes downstream on the Amity burn. What you're then going to say is what you hypothesize. Now, a hypothesis is what you think should happen. Okay. Now, in the case of Bradshaw model, what did Bradshaw say should happen? Well, he said discharge should increase. So your hypothesis should start with, I hypothesize, or Bradshaw hypothesized that discharge should increase. I would go a little bit further in hypothesis, though. I would say Bradshaw hypothesized, or you could just say I hypothesized that discharge increases a lot, and that is because Bradshaw's model indicates that that is the change expected. So it's what you think will happen. Now we're going to test Bradshaw's model. We're going to see, does the river that we're going to study increase, and does it increase a lot, the discharge? Okay, but your hypothesis just say what you expect to find. Okay, now your second hypothesis is up to you. This is where you've got some choice. Okay, now you are going to be asked to study either the bedload shape. You could choose that one. You could choose the bedload size, or you could choose the efficiency of the channel, which is known as the hydraulic radius. So I would just pause it now and decide which one do you actually want to study. Now, why that's important is you're only going to investigate one of these three, not all of them. You're going to gather data for that one when we actually gather the real data, and you're going to have to write up your results on that one. So choose the one you'd be interested in studying. Once you've selected the one you'd like to do, you've got to write up a second research question. So you'll have just written up one on discharge. So you'd now want to say, I'm also going to study a second research question. I'm going to look at how, and for example, how hydraulic radius changes downstream. I hypothesize that. And just like the first one, you've got to tell me what do you think should happen, okay, with your particular research question. So we just look at those three options. If you're going with hydraulic radius, you're going to hypothesize that it's going to increase, but not as substantially as discharge, because that's what Bradshaw shows. If you've chosen rock size, or what Bradshaw called load particle size, then you're going to say that I would expect it to decrease as I move downstream, but not substantially, not as the same extent of discharge, but I would expect smaller rocks. And if you are choosing rock shape, what Bradshaw calls channel bed roughness, you are going to say that you'd expect it to decrease. I would actually go a little bit further with, if this is your hypothesis, I would say you would expect rocks to become more rounded as you move downstream. So for your second hypothesis, select one of the three that you're going to pick. Tell me that that's what you're going to research, and then tell me what you expect to find for those two research questions. And that is you now having completed your introduction. You're looking for, because you're typing this, you really don't want more than 2 pages of typed. As a matter of fact, if you've got more than 2, you're going to have a real problem. If this was handwritten, you might go up to 3, but you're looking at maybe a page and a half of typed text that you could type in round about kind of 25 to 30 minutes, absolute maximum. Have a little read of this. This is important factors. You are aiming to score 6 marks, so I would be looking to see 6 very clearly explained bits of knowledge. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for knowledge that you have, knowledge and understanding that you are explaining clearly in a way that I can understand. And I'm also looking for you to be using terminology like attrition or tributaries or through flows, all of these keywords, and that you don't just use them, but you actually outline, you know what these words mean. And I'll be looking for quite a few uses of geographic terms in order to be giving you the top level marks. So well done. Once you finish this, you completed your introduction, and you'll be moving on to your methodology.